have a very quick outline of the 9 most common forms of dementia. That's chapter 4. I actually put all the dementias in there just because occasionally I run into a smart aleck who wants to know what are all the dementias. Well, they're listed. And then in the back of the book, I've got the tools that we use in gerontology. And these are the tools that we use to stage a person, because in staging a person, we're looking at their behaviors, and their behaviors then indicate brain damage. And the brain damage at that point indicates how much healthy brain tissue is still there. That tells us how much time is expected for this person. Does that make sense to everybody? 3 of you said yes. Fortunately, I've been speaking for several days, so 3 is all I needed to go forward. So in your book, and I'm so glad I brought these. Otherwise, I would have to ask one of y'all, what page am I on? At the start of your final chapter, which is where the staging tools are, chapter 5. On chapter 5, there's actually a dead spot right here. I noticed when I was speaking where the microphone would go up. On chapter 5, page 96, the 4 stages of chronic traumatic encephalopathy are there. And this is the only dementia graded on 4 stages, the way cancer is graded, and it's because of how aggressive the disease is. Okay, so that is your staging tool for CTE. That was simple, right? Y'all were thinking we were going to be here all night. Here I am, moving right along. Okay, then you have another tool for staging that's called the Dementia Behavioral Assessment Tool. And what that tool is it is started as Reisberg's tool from the 1970s, and then it was updated. And it was updated to allow us to have professionals observe a person's behavior and very quickly determine what stage of the disease they're in, because dementias actually move in a predictable and progressive manner. So we can tell you what behavior is going to come next based on the type of the dementia the person has. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So in the Dementia Behavioral Assessment Tool, you are able to look at your client, patient. What do y'all have? Just old people that wander around behind you? Yeah, that's what we call it in Texas. But it allows you to look at the person and to help the family understand how advanced the dementia process actually is, which allows the family to recognize the need to listen to you to move forward in whatever treatment plan you're trying to work on. Y'all good? The stage of dementia tells you how much brain tissue is damaged or gone, estimated at this point. The stage tells you what the mental equivalency of this person is. So a lot of times you're really struggling with a family because to you it's clear this is a stage 5 person and the family's arguing, no, mama's safe to live at home, until you get to the staging tool, and the staging tool says this person actually has the equivalency of an 8-year-old. And that changes the family's thinking. The hardest part for us is that people with dementia don't look physically sick until stage 6 of the disease, when they've lost a whole pound of brain tissue, and families are expecting that if this person was really sick, they would look sick. And I'll give you some really odd examples. I had a community call me once. They wanted to fly me to the state to meet a member, a resident of their community, because they had figured out, these are the licensed people, they had figured out that this guy was intentionally stiffening his body and throwing himself face first on the ground 6 or 7 times a day, because if he did that enough, they would let him go home. And not a single person in the community recognized that it's a classic Louis Bonnie dementia fall. But they thought he was doing it on purpose, even though they knew he had a dementia diagnosis, which means that they had no idea that somebody with brain damage is not doing anything on purpose. They're responding to the brain that is still functioning. Does that make sense? Yes. I had a family, and the mother lives in Austin, Texas. The children, the biological children, live in California. The biological children were mad at the mother because she had developed one of the PPAs, a form of FTD, one of the communication disorders. One of the unusual things about the FTDs is that in the mid stages of dementia, the person develops an incredible ability to do art, and they can begin to paint like Rembrandt. And this family decided that the mother was pretending she couldn't use language because her children were not giving her enough praise for her work. Now, does that even make sense to you? That someone would think that way about their own mother? Another thing, just as a side while we're here, three times in my career as a gerontologist, and I've done this 35 years, three times I have said to a family, is your mom a smart lady? And three times children have looked at me dead in the eye and said, no, not really. If I ask any of you if your mother was a smart person, would you put together genetically that if you said no, that would mean you weren't very bright? The best answer from those children, especially when you're already expecting them to go, no, mom's a smart as a whip. Mom's smart as a whip. Not these three. These three said, no, mom wasn't that quick. And it made me wonder how far they got in school. So let me walk you through the dementia behavioral assessment tool because you've already seen the CTE tool. There's not much to it. We don't have that much information on that disease yet. But let me walk you through the DBAT tool, and then from there we'll be able to jump over into the FTD tool, and I probably will not talk as long. Look at how happy people were. Oh, thank God. Y'all ran into the group that was here before y'all. They were dying to get out of this room. Skylar locked them in here for 4 hours. So one of the things that surprises families is that we actually have these tools and that they don't work. So this is one of the slides that I like to use, and I use this because there are three different stages of dementia in here, and these are the stages you and I work with, or that I certainly work with most often. And one of the things that you see in memory care communities or where people with dementia are around is that the family says, my person's not ready for memory care. My person doesn't need any special assistance or help because my person doesn't look sick yet. And what they don't realize is people with dementia do not look physically sick until they lose an entire pound of brain tissue. And the reason that I love this slide is it's three stages of dementia. 5, 6, and 7 are in this slide. And so by using this, we allow ourselves to show the families that you're right. This lady does not look the same as this lady. But it's just because this lady has not advanced to this lady's level of the disease yet. And this lady has not advanced to this lady's level of disease yet. And so by using something as simple as this picture, we can help families begin to understand why we stage people and what it is we're talking about. So just as a rule of thumb, this is a stage 5 lady. She's very locked on and engaged to an activity director who's just out of the picture. They're actually talking about the sea. This was taken in Florida. This lady is stage 5, and I'm assuming the OT people have already picked up something about her hands. And the nurses and the social workers, and actually all of us should have picked up there's something terrible going on here, and what would we always have to look for is a pain assessment on her. And in the back of your book, you have all the observational tools that we use in gerontology. They're all observation because you can't ask a person with brain damage to give you a real answer. So this lady, very engaged, face looks normal, looks like she's just anybody's grandma, just has some arthritis issues. This lady looks much, much different. This is a stage 6 person. You see a blankness in the face. Empathy is beginning to be lost. But do you see almost a hostility in her eyes? Have you seen that in anybody you know? Some of these stage 6 people can scare you because they do have this, it's not unusual to have this very hostile look. And also between these three stages is when the family really begins to notice that the vacancy in the eyes that they begin to see in stages 3 and 4, but just for seconds, that vacancy is becoming longer and much longer by here. And then this is a stage 7 lady. This lady is bedbound, but she was brought in and set into this chair for the picture. This one picture alone gives us as professionals a very honest look at what families see. They walk into memory care and they see only these folks and they don't realize that their person looks like that, or there's still a bunch of these folks running around and eventually they will look the other way. Does that make sense? Y'all say yes to anything, won't you? I saw you back there with the boxed wine. I know you. I know. So in stage one, we have normal aging. And the reason we have normal aging is all staging tools must begin with a baseline of normal. You and I are normal. Dementias are diseases of aging, but they are not normal aging. As I was listening to the doctor a while ago and he was going through all the things, what struck me as a gerontologist was he was talking about diet changes, we got exercise and sauna. I'm 62 years old. My generation moves 80% less than my grandparents, and my grandparents moved 10% less than their parents. And when you look at how slow human evolution is, you see all the things that he was talking about, why they make sense, why they talk about a Mediterranean diet, why they talk about the need for us to move at least an hour a day. The Million Veterans Longitudinal Study came out last year. And if you have not read it, you should read it. It is 8 things to do in order to change your trajectory for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, dementia, and aging. For some reason, men only have to do 5 of them. So if you're sitting next to a man, feel free to kick him. And because it was a study done out of the Veterans Association, number 2 on the list of 8 things to change, number 2 was don't get addicted to opiates. Because which group gave away more opiates than Ohio? And that would be the VA. Okay, so I got that one already beat. Number 1 is you have to exercise at least an hour a day because you're trying to do what happened evolutionary. And evolution in humans is very, very slow. And then the other thing is our grandparents ate a pound and a half of sugar a year. Today's teenager is eating 154 and a half pounds of processed sugar a year. I grew up eating food that was grown on my family, cattle that were slaughtered by my family. We grew everything, ate everything. I never ate at McDonald's until I was a senior in high school on a track trip. So it really does come down to the 2 ugliest words in the English language, diet and exercise. Yes. So you and I are number 1. We are aging normally. We do not expect you to develop dementia. We expect you to age normally. And by aging normally, that means that we're never going to have anyone have to help us. We may go a little slower. We may move a little slower. But basically, we should age in a very positive manner. Now, how many of you have seen the dreadful words normal aging atrophy of the brain? Have you seen that on anything? Normal aging atrophy of the brain. Doesn't that mean we're all going to get dementia? Why didn't they just attach the rest of the paragraph? Normal aging atrophy of the kidneys, normal aging atrophy of balance, normal aging atrophy of muscles, lungs, livers, pancreas. The reason is nobody's worried about putting their pancreas give them dementia is part of it. But the other thing is people don't realize the human brain actually gets thicker and richer with age. The neuron dendrites, the roots on a neuron on a 20-year-old person. Are there any 20-year-olds in here? No. You can talk about. Why can I talk about? I don't want you to sit. I don't want to party. The roots on the brains of a 20-year-old person are about that long. The roots on the brain of a 90-year-old person are about that long. The brain gets thicker and richer, but then you see this paperwork that says normal atrophy of the brain. Everything is atrophying. It's just that all of our systems started by working above 100%. The reason a 90-year-old person may be slower with recall, their brain has a lot more files to go through to find that information. And the second, the primary, really the bigger cause, is reflexes. Who do we send to the Olympics? Do we send 90-year-old people or do we send jumpy, twitchy little 13-year-olds? We send those jumpy, twitchy people. Their reflexes are faster. So don't worry when you read things about normal activity of the brain. Your whole body is doing that. But you started at above 100%. When I was growing up, we would read stuff in science and it would say, you only use 10% of your brain, but Albert Einstein used 13. And I always thought, how they figure out Albert Einstein used 13 and why would you have a brain and not use it? I bet it's that we don't know what it's used for. And it turns out you use your whole brain. We're just not still sure what all it's used for. So you and I are normal. You and I are aging normally. We are number one. We will never require care. We will live and die at home. And by live and die at home, what I actually mean, since you're medical professionals, I'll share it with you. You're going to have a massive heart attack or stroke. You'll go to the hospital, and 3 days later, you'll die. We'll cry and come to your funeral. That's really what living normally is. Okay? But because you deal with people with dementia, I want you to find, we'll come visit. It's a nice thing. Do a great eulogy. You should know them. People cry, they laugh, we eat food, we say nice things, and go. I want you to get these two books, The Mature Mind and The Creative Age. They are both by Dr. Cohen. When you finish reading these books, if you're older than 20, you'll walk up and pick the first teenager you see. When you read The Creative Age, you will realize that the population of people that you dedicate yourself to and take care of didn't age normally. Greatest works in art, literature, public policy, politics come from our oldest generation. The people who win the Nobels are our older generation. And that's just how life is. You obtain mastery of your skill, of your craft, only after you reach the age of 50. Only after the age of 50 do both hemispheres of the brain begin to work together. And because of what we do, these are two of the few books written about normal aging brains. And it will make you feel so good. I write books. I write books about dementia. Do you know why? They make money. Everybody wants to read about dementia. Nobody wants to read about normal aging. Read these books. Put them in your professional library. You will feel so much better for doing that. So most of us, we're going to live and die at home. Stage 2 is where mild cognitive impairment is the term that's used. Now, you should know that when you and I are dealing with people, if they come to you and tell you the PCP said they have mild cognitive impairment, what the PCP meant was they have moderately severe dementia and they're in stage 5 of the disease because the PCP never gave them the correct test. The test that insurance companies want used in our country for people who have questions about cognition is the mini mental status exam. That's Folstein and Folstein's exam from 1972. It was designed as an orientation test. If we hit Catherine in the head right now and she fell down, we took her to the ER, the doctor would quickly ask her a series of questions to basically determine if she's having a brain bleed. And if she can answer those questions, she's not having a brain bleed, we'll give her something for a headache and send her home. The insurance companies found out that a person with dementia can pass that test on average for 5 years before they fail it and someone gives them a MOCA or a SLUMS test. When if they had been given those tests to begin with and had been told it was a terminal diagnosis, the family would have been able to make appropriate plans with their assets. And instead, because of how it's set up, they don't find out until much too late that this stage passed a long time ago. I had a lady yesterday at the conference that argued with me. Her husband was in stage 2, and I said, ma'am, you wouldn't be here if he was in stage 2 because stage 2 is too hard for you to catch. There's such a subtle change. And when you ask the person about it, they'll actually say, yeah, I think I'm messing up some stuff. And when you say, let's go to the doctor, they have a reason why they don't. They have a reason why they don't, and a reason why they don't. And the spouse finally gives up asking them to go. So mild cognitive impairment is when the medications were intended to be started. All those medicines they're coming out with, do you think they work? I can find you a group of doctors that say yes, and I can find you a group of doctors that say no. And I can find you a larger group that says the only person that's helping is whoever owns that pharmaceutical company. And the reason is the medicine was intended to be started here in stage 2. And the research from the National Institutes of Health showed that if the medications were started in stage 2 or stage 3 at the latest, then the person had a 69% chance of continuing into old age, meaning their mid-80s, and dying of old age, meaning heart attack or stroke, without ever developing stage 5 of dementia. That it would slow the disease progression so dramatically that 3/4 of our people would not develop into actually needing care. The problem is in this country, most people are not diagnosed with dementia until stage 5 of the disease. They're put on the medication then, and all the medication does is slow down the worst part of the disease when there is the most brain damage. On average, 2 to 3 years. That's $200,000 to $300,000 in care, depending on where you live in the U.S. Okay, so nobody asked the families, would your loved one want this medication? And nobody explains to the families that this is the reality of it. The other thing is if I went to a PCP, and God bless our PCPs, they do most of the care in our country. They're good, good folks. But if I went to a PCP and said my big toe hurts, where would I go after that? If I went and I said my knee hurts, where would I go? If I said, there's times where I feel like my heart's fixing to come out and then I get real nauseous and my right shoulder hurts, where would I go? If I come in and say, I think I'm having cognition issues, suddenly we're an expert. Let me get the MMSE out. To my mother's house one day and she looked at me and she went, apple ball penny. I said, excuse me? She said, apple ball penny. I said, why are you saying apple ball penny? She said, I found out about your test. Getting myself ready. I said, we change words every 3 months, mother. Never change the words because I take the joy out of her life. So mild cognitive impairment is very, very subtle. But the odd thing is, in this stage, the person says, I think I'm beginning to have trouble. It is not a normal human thought to think something's wrong with my brain. So if you think that, you need to go to the doctor. Now, as I said that, last year I was doing what they call the Area Agency on Aging tour of Deep East Texas. And let me just tell you, there's towns in Deep East Texas you don't want to be in when the sun goes down. Just say it, don't be there. It's scary. And the man came into the conference and he said he went to his doctor and he said he told his doctor, I'm having memory issues. And the doctor said, oh, well, if you're thinking that, then you're fine. It's the opposite. If you're thinking you're having memory issues, you need to be being seen by a specialist because there's 100 common things that could make you think that. Okay, and that can be even in stage 2. So we have to go to a specialist to find out, is one of these other things the actual causation? So common causations of memory issue, depression. The group least likely to be treated for depression, most likely to have depression, people over 60. You've had loss, things hurt. I don't see anybody in here over 60 except me, and I can tell you right now, I'm in pain. Right? You hurt. Life begins to hurt. Every decade of life gives you another level of hurt, right? But this person is slow. It's subtle. It's not even been really decided when does this start, because some of the research seems to indicate that Alzheimer's dementia begins in a person's 20s, but it takes 40 to 50 years before it does enough damage that anyone notices. Doesn't that just scare the bejeebers out of you? Makes you want to go run up your credit cards, doesn't it? And then you realize the money's going to come due, and your excuse of I could be developing dementia in 50 years isn't going to work. So don't do that. Don't do that. Because it's very slow, very subtle. It's noticed by the person, but then it's dismissed by them. It's just not anything that they've noticed. Stage 3 is also where the medicine was intended to start. And this is where the doctor would use the term dementia for the first time. But how do you make a dementia diagnosis? Is it the MMSE? Is it the PCP saying they've got dementia? Or my favorite, the neurologist who says they've got dementia and you don't need to come back anymore? That's very helpful, right? It's 28 different tests to actually make a complete diagnosis. It's a SPECT scan, a PET scan, an EEG, an EKG, an MRI, a CAT scan, a spinal lumbar tap. There's a huge number of tests, and we haven't even got to the neuropsych testing. How many of you want to go spend 8 hours a day doing a neuropsych test? Okay. It's my scariest nightmare. I would cry if y'all made me go do that. And we make dementia people do that all the time. And then we don't give them any information. I was teaching a class for the Methodist groups. And one of the ladies had been diagnosed the week before with stage 4 cancer. And she had an identical twin. And the identical twin was being flown in to the state that we were in so that they could go to the doctor together to see if the twin had something as well. In the course of the day's teaching, she had to get up and leave the room 8 times because she got a call from the social worker to set up the social worker meeting. Then she got a call from the nurse to set up the nurses meeting. Then she got a call from the doctor to make sure everybody was calling her and it was all going okay. And then she got a call from the lab wanting to tell her what day she was going to be there. Then she got a call from the radiologist telling her what day to be there. And as I sat there and watched this, everybody in the room was a dementia person, not like weird dementia person, not dementia person. They didn't have it. Okay, y'all know where I'm at. So what we talked about was look at all the support for cancer, and the dementia family gets nothing but your loved one has dementia, don't come back at all. Or your loved one has dementia, take this medicine. And nothing about which dementia it is. So in stage 3, we expect the person to be told which dementia they have, because how else are we going to do proper care? The type of dementia determines the tool you use. The type of dementia determines what kind of behaviors you see that are normal and part of the disease. It tells you what kind of clinical features that will be there. It tells you whether or not this person is safe. And it just doesn't happen. Stage 3 is typically when the spouse notices something's wrong. How many of you are married and you'll admit it in public? What do y'all think? You don't think J-Lo and Ben are really breaking up? Or do you think they're putting rings on and off just to mess with paparazzi? What do y'all think? Can't decide. So how many of you are married? How many of you would be happy if your spouse pointed out that you seem to be having cognitive difficulty? The reality of human behavior is that if I said to any one of you, bless you, I think your brain is not working correctly, your immediate human response is to become furious. So when we deal with our clients and our patients, the ones that said to their loved one, I'm sorry, you're not doing this the way you used to, something seems different with you. Stage 3 is usually when the wife or the husband does that and they get their head chopped off, they get hit it back to them on a platter, and they don't make that mistake anymore. So the children wonder, why doesn't mom tell us what's going on? Why doesn't dad tell us what's going on? Well, they tried to address it. They got their head chopped off. They're smart enough to keep their mouth shut because it didn't go anywhere. And when they tried to tell the doctor didn't see it because it wasn't a big toe, it wasn't a hurt knee, and it wasn't a palpitating heart. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Your staging tool for the DBAT is on page 100, I believe. I lied, it's on 102. Okay. Stage 4 is when the adult children notice. And what is the holiday where the adult children are most likely to see their parents? Thanksgiving. You go do that Thanksgiving visit, you don't have to go back at Christmas and live that misery again. And realize that's the most unhappy holiday of the year, right? But Thanksgiving is typically when the adult children go home. That's when they're most likely to go home. And it is when they finally notice that something is different about their loved one. And they bring it up and they get their head chopped off as well. And so now we've got a spouse who doesn't want to bring it up and an adult child who doesn't want to bring it up because it's just not working out very well for them. Okay, John?
How many people are cold? There's 2 cold. I promise we won't warm it up too much.
It's all the younger people in the audience raised their hand and said they were too cold. Those of us on gabapentin and having hot flushes are going to come stab you in the video. Stage 4 is called moderate dementia. And this person is now looking to their spouse to give them answers at the doctor's office. This person, if you continue to question them past the point of comfort, begins to get ugly with you. This person makes bizarre and elaborate plans to do themselves in. Now, I come from Texas where everybody's got a gun in every corner of the room, and you're absolutely right. We do. We've got them everywhere. If the person told me they were going to hurt themselves and the gun was sitting right there, then we're going to have a different reaction. But when the person's story is this, and this gentleman was head of psychiatry for the state that he lived in. He wasn't like a psychiatrist, he was head of psychiatry. This was his plan. When it gets bad enough, I'm going to get a round trip ticket, fly to Norway, join the Hemlock Society, and kill myself. And I said, why do you need a round trip ticket? And he made a funny face and shook his head. And he could tell that I didn't understand. And he said, no, no, no. When it gets bad enough, I'm getting a round trip ticket, flying to Norway, joining the Hemlock Society, and killing myself. And I said, but you don't get to come back in first class. They're going to put you under the plane. I don't think you need a round trip ticket. And he said, no, no. When it gets bad, I'm getting a round trip ticket, flying to Norway, joining the Hemlock Society, kill myself. Do you really get a round trip ticket to Norway? Do you need membership in the Hemlock Society? No. Do you see how the plan didn't make sense? But in stage 4, it's not unusual for you to hear plans about getting myself in when it gets good enough. The reality is, when it gets bad enough, they've forgotten the plan.
So you have to do it in stage 3.
Yes. Or, no, my friend Catherine. I was working hard on the ranch one day when Catherine called, and as you know, as health professionals, you've made these same plans with your best friends. If we get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Catherine calls and I say, hi, Catherine, what are you doing? And she goes, I got us covered. I said, what do you mean you got us covered? She said, I got us covered. And I realized then we were talking about dementia. And I said, how do you have us covered? She said, we just had to score some street fentanyl. She said, one lick, we'll be gone. And I said, I like it. How much money do you need? She said, send me $50. I think we can fill it up.
Give away my secret.
So it's normal for us to get freaked out. And it's normal for us, because we work around people with dementia, to begin to think that we're starting to see this in ourselves. So how many of you have walked in a room and you didn't remember what you went in there for, and your first thought was, oh, crap, I've got it too. That's actually normal brain function. It means whatever you're doing, you're tired, you're stressed, your brain doesn't care, your brain's basically bad. Who wants to go sit on the TV, sit on the couch, watch bad TV, eat chips, and drink soda, and the doctor just told you don't do that, right? He told you to go sit in the sauna and sweat yourself to death. And then I heard eat some bad food that has fiber in it, and that I was like, I can't hear this anymore. This person fools their family. They fool friends, they fool medical professionals, they fool people at church and synagogue, they fool neighbors, but not intentionally. They are fooling people because people think if they were really sick, they would look sick. And because the brain functions and then it hits a glitch, it hits a hole, it hits where stuff is not there anymore, there's a dip, but then they recover. The family thinks they're faking it, they're pretending it's not really that bad. How many times have you been told that mama's got a little bit of dementia?
What's the thing?
Just a little bit. That's like being kind of pregnant. Yeah, kind of like a partial heart attack.
Something kind of like
And then I look over and she's drinking a beer. Lord, I love you guys. And so it's very hard to move the family past this point that this person is doing stuff on purpose. And this is when they're most likely to get angry with their loved one because they think they're doing this stuff on purpose. And the higher education the person had, the more status they had in the community, the harder it is for the family to deal with what's going on. Especially if it was a father who's a doctor, we see a whole lot of that, or the mother was somebody very powerful in the community, because they take their status from their parents, and there is very much a stigma that goes with dementia. So you start in stage 3 if it's somebody brand new, and you begin to work down. But as a general rule of thumb, if someone is reaching out to me for assistance and questions about dementia, their loved one is actually in stage 5. Because stage 4, you couldn't put your finger on enough things to call a professional. Stage 3, you'd see it, but then it would correct again. And so if they reach out to us, the research shows we're probably dealing with a stage 5 person. When people come to my conferences, yesterday a woman said, "Oh, he's only in stage 2." I said, "Ma'am, if he was in stage 2, you wouldn't be here, because stage 2 doesn't have enough glitches for you to think I should go to a dementia conference." Does that make sense? So you start in stage 3, you check off every behavior you see in this person, not the family themselves, just the person. And then if it continues into stage 4, you move on into stage 4. And it's not like the person goes to sleep Tuesday night in stage 4 and wakes up Wednesday in stage 5. There's a fluctuation of several days, several weeks, even a few months before you determine the person is actually in that stage. Stage 5 is usually when you and I come into contact with people, and this is called moderately severe dementia. And what it means is a half a pound of brain tissue is now gone. It has been replaced by cerebral spinal fluid. At night, when the brain cleans itself, when you and I reach REM sleep, our brain cells shrivel and our brain washes itself clean of all the broken debris, the dead proteins, the dead cells, whatever didn't work today, it cleans itself. In people with dementia, they're beginning to have trouble with the blood-brain barrier. It's not cleaning the brain as well. That's why they might wake up very alert versus not very alert, all because of the cleaning system not working. I had a family call me one day and say, "It's not that bad. Mom's got moderately severe dementia." And I know immediately that means she's missing half a pound of brain tissue. And in the beginning of stage 5, a 12-year-old, in the middle of stage 5, an 8-year-old, by the end of stage 5, a 4-year-old. And having the staging tool and checking off what you're seeing and helping the family understand there is no if, ands, or buts. You can either go to the bathroom and control your bladder or you're incontinent. You can either control your bowel or you're incontinent. It's like being pregnant. And the families really have so much emotion in it that you have to stick to your staging tool to help them understand where they actually are. And the most common thing you're going to hear among the tears is, "I didn't want to know this, but thank you for telling me, and now I know what's coming next." Does that make sense to everybody? Because remember, they're predictable, progressive dementias. We know what's going to come next. I gotcha. Gotcha. This person doesn't look sick at the beginning, but what I ask families is, when you finally shut your eyes at night, do you think my mother's an 80-year-old mother, or do you think my 80-year-old mother is like a 4-year-old? And families will be honest with you about which one they're seeing. Okay? So this person, this is where hunting and gathering begins. That's going from room to room, picking up neat new things, finding them, stashing them somewhere else in another room. That's why we tell you at nursing homes, don't bring the good stuff, because it's going to wander off. You may not see a hunter and gatherer. You may see Goldilocks. Goldilocks goes from room to room to room, trying out neat new beds till she finds one that's perfect. She takes a nap, and then she wakes up and goes back to hunting and gathering. These are very, very busy people. Does that make sense to everybody? And still don't look sick. Okay? So your staging tool tells you what stage it is, what the medical name of the stage is, the term that we call it, stage 5, we call all dressed up and ready to go. And then it also tells you the mental equivalency. When a family calls me on the phone and I'm talking to them, I begin to run through stage 5. So, do you think your husband recognizes you? Oh, yes, 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 he does. Do you think he knows what day of the week it is, what season it is? No, no, he's completely lost. Is he starting to have falls? Starting to crave sweets? It's like you're watching him. No, I'm looking at a staging tool that tells me what would be the normal behavior at this point. And so you begin to help the family through the tool. Realize that you're always going to be in front of them because you don't have the emotional attachment to that person that they do. And they are still seeing the person that used to be there. You know, he only pees the bed sometimes. We count that as urinary incontinence. Okay, you with me? All right. Stage 6, the person finally looks ill. And this is the first time that this is now evident that a stranger meeting them would say that they look ill. They have gone from being able to stand and walk and move to where they're now bent and they're shuffling. Their fall risk goes up, and understand the fall risk goes up all the way to bedbound. Even bedbound, their falls are actually higher because they continue to try to get out of bed, and we don't understand that. They don't have the ability to move themselves, but they can still get out of bed, right? So stage 6 is now called severe dementia. Is its medical terminology. We call it lost in their own world because this person doesn't seem to be aware of what's going on around them. This is where the broken bone occurs from a spiral fracture of the hip, from them standing and turning. We've been saying it wrong and we need to correct that. We have been saying your mother fell and broke her hip, and what we need to say is your mother broke her hip and then she fell. And we've got to tell them that when we meet them, otherwise it becomes a CYA and we look like we don't know what we're talking about. But if I told them beforehand that there was a high probability of this, then when it happens, I told them it was going to happen. And if my mother dies without breaking her hip, my mother was bigger than your mother. It's that simple. We want them to understand that these things are going to happen. Their bones are 6 times more likely to break than normal aging elderly, and they need to know this. And they're not going to be upset with you. They're going to cry and tell you you're the first person that showed them this stuff. Why didn't the doctor tell them? It's because the doctor wasn't trained to do this, right? Okay, so stage 6, they now look sick, and this is something that aggravates me to death. How many of you have been told that that resident is combative with care? They're combative. How many of you are parents and you'll admit it in public? Wow, only 4 of you have procreated. That's incredible. Did you ever take a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old with a poopy diaper away from where they were having so much fun playing with their friends? And they had a poopy diaper on, and you laid them on top of the bed, and you knew you better be careful or you'd have to change that bed. And if it was a little boy, what else did you have to watch out for? Just catch you right in the eye when you weren't even looking for it. And that kid kicked and screamed whole way when you took them away from their friends. They kicked and screamed, they fought and twisted, they didn't want to do this, and you finally got that new diaper on them, you're you little rub rat right back out there. Did you go up to your mother and go, I have a combative child? Or did you just say, I was trying to change a 3-year-old that didn't want to be changed? How many of you have been taught to not let people touch you in certain areas? Some of you just loose and easy, I see. I can see who was waving their head and who wasn't. You need to double check this script. When do these care challenges occur? In the bathroom. When we're trying to do intimate care. How many of the activities of daily living are intimate care? Toileting, bathing, grooming, dressing. Oral hygiene falls under grooming. So it is certain intimate work that we're trying to do that we have to do. Gotta get clean, right? You get to bathing. What's the point of bathing? To make someone so mad they'll beat the daylights out of you? Or to clean skin? And so the best thing today might be a bed bath. Might be just a washcloth on one arm. I mean, you got to be honest. Are they out working on the railroad? Not really. How dirty can they be? Now, I'm not talking incontinent care. We still got to keep them clean. So you've gone through and you're checking off, and now you're finally checking to stage 7. Stage 7 is the bedbound stage. It is called very severe dementia. That is its official name. Person is now bedbound, they're wheelchair bound, they're totally relying upon us to do their care. And folded into your DBAT is the actively dying tool, so that you're able to help families recognize what is happening in the final 9 months of life, which is the time that in gerontology we refer to as actively dying. Actively dying is not the final day, actively dying is the final 9 months. Most people are going to die in the season of their birth. The season of birth is 30 days before your birthday and 60 days after your birthday. If you're a religious or spiritual person, whether it's the Talmud, the Quran, or the Bible, each of those books speak of a time to be born and a time to die, that there is season and purpose to life. If you look at the demographics of first world countries, 78% of us die in the cycle of our life after the age of 25. Before the age of 25, nothing on your body hurts. So when your stupid friend says, hey, let's jump off the bridge and see if we can land in the water, you go, okay. After 25, you're like, that kind of hurt. I don't want to do that. Even in dementia and even in cancer, the cycle of life theory still holds. So when I'm doing a stage 7 person, a stage 6 person, I'm very aware of their birthday so that I am watching to see if I'm beginning to see that turnover. When you do your staging tool, stage the person, draw a line and date it, come back every quarter and go through it again. It begins to show the family how rapidly the disease is progressing, which helps them with their grieving process and helps them to prepare for the next part of life. Most of your patients, clients, residents, members are not going to make it to stage 7. Most people with dementia die in stage 5 or stage 6 from heart attack or stroke just because that's how humans die. Your third staging tool is the one for frontal temporal dementia. These are much different than the other dementias because they are primarily attacking and destroying the frontal and the temporal lobes. And so your tool is on 109. The difference in this tool, we still have 7 stages. You and I are still stage 1 because we're the baseline. But in this tool, we need to know which form of FTD the person has. Then you go down that column and starting in stage 3, if there is an X in the column, it means the behavior on the left-hand side is associated with that form of FTD. When you get to stage 6, there are no more X's because in stage 6, all dementias are considered the same medically due to the amount of brain tissue loss. Does that make sense to everybody? Have I depressed you in any way that I can feel good about? It's because you're professionals, isn't it? Okay. My phone number, if you need it, is 254-216-3668. And if you ever have any questions, please feel free to give me a call. And I donated your book to you today.